In this video, you're going to learn exactly how to use visual effects to turn a regular dude into a scary vampire. This is a technique that works for all kinds of effects to go on somebody's face, digital makeup. It's all pretty much the same workflow. So here we have our shot of Joel, and all we did was just have him open his mouth like that and close the door. And what we want to do is put digital fangs on him right here, so that he is a vampire guy. Rawr. And what we want these to do is animate in like this as he kind of opens his mouth and hisses. We're also going to work on his eyes, but we're going to do a special fancy thing that you'll just have to wait till the end to see.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
Let me zoom in our work area here. So we're just looking at what we need to. And the first thing we need to do is get some kind of asset that we're going to use for his fangs. Now, you could do this a bunch of different ways. You could use an image of vampire fangs. You might be able to just like paint those yourself, but rather than try to match all the colors and everything, we're just going to take his teeth and elongate them. How the heck do we do that? Well, I'm going to click here in the empty space in my node graph in Fusion. I'm going to hold Shift and hit spacebar, and I'm going to type paint. So that brings up our paint node. Now, a paint node, if you're not familiar, is a node that lets you kind of do Photoshoppy things to your video. Things like cloning and painting and moving things around and kind of like playing with the pixels. That's going to be perfect for elongating some teeth. So let's take the media in and just plug this into our paint node like this, and I'll drag the paint node here into our second viewer. So now we're looking at the paint node. And we have this little overlay, which is kind of hard to see, but there's a little green circle there, and that's my brush. By default, if you just paint, it paints like white on this canvas. What we're going to do is go over here to our apply controls, and I'm going to pick this one right here. This buddy is the smear brush. So we're going to pick that, and then we're also going to go over here to this upper part and select this fourth icon over just the regular paintbrush. That will switch us into smear stuff around mode. And if I zoom in here, give ourselves a little bit of room, and let's twirl down the brush controls and take the size down and the softness down a little bit. And I'm going to pick not his middle teeth or the ones out from that, but the second ones out from his middle teeth, the kind of canine teeth, right? And we're just going to take this and just push it down like this. Now, this isn't going to look great. This is going to be kind of okay. But what we're really doing is we're just taking those colors and just smearing them down on both sides. We're just kind of elongating this tooth, just so we take those colors and push them down. All right. Now, if you zoom out, it actually doesn't look too bad. We're almost kind of getting the effect that we want. But of course, when we play this back, everything's going to get ruined. In fact, it's not really going to like playing back. It's going to do all kinds of weird things. So at whatever frame we started with, which I started with frame 108, I'm just going to take a still picture of this. So I'm going to right click anywhere and go to save image. And I'll just save this to my desktop for now. The save as type, we're going to pick OpenEXR, and we'll call this fangs still and hit save. So essentially what I'm doing is just taking a still photo of this image that's kind of smeared. Now, you don't have to do it like this. You could open it up in Photoshop or an image editing program and kind of do that and sort of do the same thing if you don't want to do it with the paint node, but it's pretty dang easy with the paint node. And so now we have this image saved out. Let's go ahead and bring that back in. So I'm going to open up a Explore window, go to my desktop, and we have this fangstill.exr. I'll take this and just drag this in like that. And what that's going to do is add it to my node graph, but it's also going to add it to my media pool. And right here where it says fangstill.exr, if you're working in a color managed mode, which in Resolve 19, I would recommend working color managed. If you right click on fangstill, you can go down to input color space, and you're going to want to select linear. That's going to bring this in a way that makes any sense at all for Fusion. So now if we drag this up, this should look exactly the same between our paint node and our media in. Those should look exactly the same. Shouldn't be any problem. If there is a problem, your color management is messed up, okay? So now we have this still. I can get rid of this paint node, and let's call this fangs still. And what we're gonna do is use a pen tool to kind of cut this out a little bit nicer. We have the basic color, but we want to cut it out a little better. So let's take this fang still and actually let's just put this over our media in like this. This media in, this is going to be our original footage. Underscore MI for media in. This is fang still underscore MI. Always good to rename stuff. So we're going to take this and grab our polygon pen tool and we'll just turn this off for now. I'm also going to right click here where it says right click for shape animation. Remove this polygon 1 polyline. What that's going to do is make sure that this isn't animated because I don't want to animate the path. I just want to basically just cut out a shape. So this polygon 1, let's make a line that makes sense here. And I'll just kind of draw a fang shape here like this. And then we're going to add another polygon here. Just add another one. Again, remove that polyline and turn this off. Same thing. There we go. So now we have these 2 polygons that are cutting out just a little bit better cutout of these fangs. Let's turn these polygons back on. Now we have the fangs there. And when we put this fang still that's cut out over our original, we have these kind of cutouts here. Now, these should be a little bit softer. So we're just going to soften these edges. I'm just taking the soft edge up just a touch, just a little bit. There we go. Something like that, so that it just matches the softness of everything else around, because this isn't like really, really sharp. Yeah, something like that. And when we zoom out, it should look pretty decent, pretty good. Now, this should, at frame 108, mix with our still pretty darn well. There shouldn't be much of a problem here. But as we move, this is obviously not going to work, right? It's not moving along with his mouth. That's because his mouth is moving and the still is a still. So what we got to do is track the motion of his mouth and then move this still of the fangs along with that motion. So let's take our original footage. I'll just throw that into our viewer here. I'll hit Shift Spacebar and type PLAN. That's going to bring up our planar tracker. So our planar tracker, what that does is it lets you select an area on screen and it'll put a whole bunch of little trackers in it. And then what it will do is it'll take kind of like the average of all of those tracks and it'll let you use that motion, kind of the average motion of everything that you've tracked. So what we're going to do is start at frame 108 here, and I'm just going to select the kind of top row of teeth here, just drawing a shape around these teeth like this. Make this so you can see that a little better. I'm just going around his teeth. And then we're going to see if this tracks. Sometimes if you're selecting something that's small within the frame, it doesn't have enough room to put a bunch of tracking markers, but I think this is going to work. I'm going to switch a couple things here in the inspector. Here under reference time, I'll hit set. We're going to set that to 108, this frame that I'm on right here. For a tracker type, let's do point. Motion type, instead of perspective, we can probably do just like translation and rotation. That's probably all we need. Generally, you want to pick the highest up on this menu that you can. As it goes closer to the top, the less problems you'll have, but it's also a simpler motion. And so if something's not, like kind of turning in 3D space, you usually don't need the perspective. You can get away with translation rotation, sometimes just translation. We're just going to go with translation rotation like this. And what I'll do is we're going to let this track both forward and backward. So let's go ahead and track it forward, and it's going to run into this door pretty quick, but that's okay. So we'll let it just kind of run into the door, and it's not going to like it for too long, but that's okay. And then at 108, let's bring it back to 108 and then track it backward. And that did a pretty good job tracking the top of his mouth like this. Great. Okay, so we're losing the track a little bit right about 114 or so, 115. But the nice thing is that at 115, we're pretty much covered by the door. So, I mean, we might be able to get away with this. Let's try it. So it's tracked a whole bunch of points on his teeth. And now this is what's really magical. We can click this button right here, the Create Planar Transform. And when we do that, we can hit that once, and then it will someplace, somewhere in Narnia, it will throw the Planar Transform node. This buddy is magical. What it does is this is like kind of like a transform node, but it has all of the tracking data that we just tracked with our planar tracker applied to it. So anything that we run through this planar transform is going to animate along with our teeth here. So if I were to throw some text on here and put that right where his teeth are, that's going to stick to his teeth. So we just do the same thing with our fangs. Let's take our fangs and just put that through our planar transform. Let's go to 108 just to be safe. That's going to put that right where it's supposed to be at 108. And now, oh baby, it mostly keeps them where they're supposed to be. And depending on how picky you want to be, I mean, if this is just a real quick meme thing, you could probably stop about here with a little bit of cleanup and it'd be fine. If you want this to look really good, we have to do a little bit more work. So I would say that for the most part, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. It's coming in a little early. So right about, we probably don't even want it even starting until probably about here, frame 91. So let's just bring our work area over to frame, let's do frame 90 just to be safe. Kind of zoom this in a little bit, just so we're only looking at what we need to look at. In fact, I could probably stop this right about here. 116. And zoom that in. Yeah, so now we just have what we need. And yeah, a lot of this is working pretty well. It's slipping a little bit here. It's kind of off of the teeth a little bit right there, but it's not too bad. And it's so quick, you might not notice. But around frame 108, it looks great. And actually the rest of this looks pretty good as far as the movement too. So I don't think we need to do a whole lot with the movement there, but let's take this planar transform and let's run this through another transform like this. And this is going to be kind of like our fixes. So this is going to be like tracking fix. And what this will do is let us just kind of move these around and tweak it a little bit. We just need to do a little bit of tweaking here. Let's take our pivot right here under transform. If we take this pivot, what this does is this moves this little indicator here. You can see this kind of little green overlay thing. Gosh, it's really hard to see. This thing right here. We're going to just put that kind of right in the middle of his teeth. Just in case we need to rotate it, it can be kind of around his teeth. So now if we rotate this, it kind of rotates that way. But let's start out by going to 108 and setting our center. And we're just going to set a keyframe there for our center. And then go here to where it's really off, like frame 97. And I'm just going to hold Control and click and drag in these centers. And then just kind of move this around and see if we can mostly get this looking good. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And now it's going to animate in between those two. And it should look pretty good. It looks pretty good. Let's take it down here. I think that's probably just fine. Let's play this back. I'd say that looks pretty good as far as the motion and everything. I don't feel like it's slipping too bad. I think that's probably fine. We can go back and mess with it a little more, but for this tutorial, we'll just call it good, okay? Now, we have a couple other problems. One is we want them to grow. And so we can have them start growing like here and then have them be full length by, 107 or something like that. So how do we get these to grow? Well, what we can do is take our masks. So we have these two masks that are masking out our still, right? And what we can do is run these two masks through another mask. Let's just do a polygon mask like this. And when you run a mask through another mask, the second mask that you put it through, or I guess in this case, the third one, but whatever mask you're running it through, that has some controls on it for how those masks are supposed to interact. So we have these two masks, which is basically making these two cutouts. But on this third one, by default, we can add some more stuff, right? But instead of doing that, we can do something where we make a shape, and then here where it says paint mode, instead of merge, we could do something like subtract. And what that's going to do is take away from this mask. So it's kind of like cutting things out, cutting out a little piece. So since this is set to subtract, we could do something like make a shape kind of like this. And then take this shape and animate it so that these fangs kind of grow like that. So we're just kind of masking the fangs with this little shape. And so something like that would work pretty well. And so at about frame 106, we want this to completely reveal the fangs. So we don't want this over the fangs at all. Okay. But at frame 91, we can take this same mask and just push this up like this. Let's just kind of adjust these. And then what it's going to do is animate in between this shape and the next shape. And look what happens. The fangs grow. Okay. So now the fangs grow like that. Oh, so cool. Okay. This one, let's add a little bit of a soft edge to it like that. So now we have the growing fangs. It's maybe just a little bit too soft. Let's take this down a touch. There we go. So now those fangs are growing pretty quickly. Yeah. There we go. So the fangs are growing. Oh, that's so cool. I love that. It looks so awesome. And then they go behind the door. And so there are a couple problems that happen there. Is one, the lighting isn't quite right once this shadow from the door comes over. As the door closes, we have this shadow on his face, and that should darken this tooth also. So what we need to do is color correct this tooth to darken as the door goes over it. And the same is true for the other one, although it's less of a big deal. It seems like it's a little bit less, but yeah, we could probably do the other one too. We'll at least do this one. How do we color correct this and then animate that color correction? What we're going to want to do is color correct the fangs still. I'm not going to want to color correct this after the transforms. You generally want to color correct stuff before you do other stuff to it. There's just less problems when you do that. And I think what we can do is just use a brightness and contrast. We'll put that right before here. And we're also going to limit this brightness and contrast to just this tooth. So I'll just grab like a ellipse, sure. And we'll just mask it to be on this side. Okay, so we're only selecting this right tooth. That'll work just fine. We don't have to be that crazy about it. Because this brightness and contrast, if we go over here and we click pre-divide post-multiply, what that's going to do is only color correct this tooth. If we don't have pre-divide post-multiply on, and we were to use something like lift, that's going to correct everything, and it's going to ruin everything. It's going to be miserable. But this pre-divide post-multiply, that keeps it so that the color correction only happens where it isn't transparent, right? All we need to do is reset everything, and we need to find a dark frame here. So a frame where it's a little bit darker on his mouth. So let's say like right here. And then we could take something like the gamma maybe down, and maybe the saturation down. And we're just matching the colors of this tooth to the other teeth, and especially the top part of this tooth. There we go. One thing we can do is take this gamma up and down, the gain up and down, and make sure that that all just feels like one thing. Just kind of checking it at different exposures, basically. This gain and gamma, this only adjusts the preview. It doesn't actually color correct the image. It's just like a way to preview what you're doing brighter or darker. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. Let's take away the gain gamma. And so now what we have is the color corrected version when it's in shadow. The problem is that when we move this, it's going to be too dark pretty much immediately, right? So when this is right, about frame 111, we're going to set a keyframe here in our settings on this blend. So the blend is like the strength or the opacity of any node. So this blend, let's set a keyframe, and we're going to have this at 1. And then what we're going to do is I'll hit the left bracket a couple times until that shadow's gone. So right when that shadow's gone, so probably frame 109, then I'm going to take the blend all the way down. So this should match perfectly here, and it should match perfectly here. And then in between, it's going to fade from one value to the other one. And ideally, this one is going to look great too. And it happens to look great. Looks pretty good. Now, it's also maybe just a little bit too light here. So what we might want to do is move this keyframe down to here. and then make this a little bit darker here. So let's just take this gamma down even more. That looks good. And then that should still work pretty well there and there. Great. So now we're just fading this down. We have a dark color correction, and then we're fading it up, essentially. So that will kind of change the exposure of that fang over time. And right here, this looks good. Right here, we have a problem where it's kind of cutting over the door. So that's the second problem, is that the door actually kind of goes in front of everything. So what we can do is we can probably just animate a rectangle mask right here. And we could select the whole door. It doesn't really matter. We don't really need that much masked. So we're just going to basically put a rectangle mask on this door, but it's only applying to this merge that controls whether these fangs show up or not. So let's do rectangle, and let's invert the rectangle. And we're also going to soften it out a little bit. Let's go ahead and open up our second viewer here, and I'll throw this rectangle over here so we can just see how soft it is at 200%. This is a little bit too soft, I would say. Only needs to be about that soft. And then let's move this over to where it really starts to make a little more sense. I'm just kind of moving this back and forth to where it isn't going to be distracting. This is only going to be for one frame. It's probably not actually the best, because what we're getting is we're getting the edge of this tooth kind of fading out too. What we really want to do is just kind of fade this side out. It's possible we might need to do something a little fancier here. Okay, let's try a little different idea, because that's going to be a problem. What we really want to do is put this kind of soft red on top of this fang. So let's take our original footage, and we're just going to merge this over itself like this. I can take this planar tracker out too. We're going to put this over itself. You can either copy and paste it like this, or you can even just take the output of this and run this into the green input, and then hold Alt and drag a little dot up here. And that's going to do the same thing. It's basically just putting the footage over itself, but we'll just do a copy because it's a little less confusing for some people. And then let's mask this original footage. Let's take a look at this. So now we aren't going to invert this. We're going to kind of put this over, and we're having the same problem, but we can take this door, and because this is all kind of one tone, we can just take this chunk of the door like this. We're going to cut this out. So this is just a cutout chunk of the door. And then we're going to use a transform to just move this over a little bit like this. I'll move it over too much first. Let's put this over here. And now we have this kind of red patch that we can easily kind of just put over our fang to fade that behind the door. See what we're doing? And this is poking out a little bit. Maybe we'll just take this down and do it right over the fang. Just whatever we want to cover up with that fang, we'll just kind of move this over like this. And so there's our fix just for that one frame. And we can just kind of flash this on. So we'll take this merge like this and keyframe the blend. The blend will be at 1 right here. So it'll be at full strength. Left bracket, this will be gone. And then next frame over, this will be gone as well. Doesn't really matter, but it'll be gone. So now we have this door coming over the fang, and it actually looks really good. But now we need to get rid of this fang. And that we can use our original idea, our rectangle for. We can just put our rectangle mask over this. We'll just animate this mask. It doesn't even have to be good. Let's invert it. Okay. So one frame this way, we'll just take this mask way over here. Animate the center, and then we'll just push this over here so it gets rid of that right side fang. Here's fine. Then we go over that fang. Okay, great. And at that point, we can take this merge, which puts our fangs over everything, and just take that down. So right here, we'll just take the blend down all the way. Here, it'll be up all the way. So if we were just going to look at this, all we're really doing is just turning these off at a certain frame, getting detailed and masking those out. That looks pretty good. Let's play this back. Yep. Now he's growing his teeth. It's looking pretty sweet. This is moving over just a little bit right there. Sometimes you don't see it until later. Let's take this tracking fixes here. Looks like it's kind of moving a little bit. Let's take this over and up just a touch. We're kind of getting the same problem where this isn't darkening enough. Right there looks pretty good. So let's just do the same thing. Let's do a brightness and contrast on this left tooth. So brightness and contrast, copy and paste this ellipse right here, but we're going to use it on this tooth. And let's bring this over to where it gets darker. Again, pre-divide, post-multiply, clip black and white. Let's take that gamma down a little bit just to blend that with our tooth. Very good. Animate this blend. It's at 1 right here where it's dark. Then I'll bring it back a couple frames. That's light. That works pretty well. Okay. Looks pretty good. So fun. There's his fangs growing. So there's one little finishing touch we need to do, and that's his eyes. Now, you can do this in Fusion. It's honestly a little bit easier to do this in the color page. So I'm just going to switch to the color page. Let's show pages. I'll switch over to color. And what we're going to do is track his eyes with a window. So I'll just make a new node here. And I'll just make a big circle window like this and track his eyes like this. Control T to track forward. We're going to let that track be horrible at the end. And actually what we're going to do instead of this is we're going to not track the 3D rotate or zoom. We're just going to track pan and tilt. It's going to make this a little bit nicer. There we go. That's going to stick this to his eye. And then once we have this tracked, then I'm going to make this a lot smaller. Right in the middle of his eyes like this. Make this really soft and then just push this gain really red like that. And that should do a pretty good job of just sticking to his eye. Look at that. That's cool. Then we animate that to right about the time where his fangs start growing. And we're going to do kind of the same thing with the blend that we were doing, except for in the color page, the blend of a node is called key output gain. It's here in the key section, which is this little part that looks like there's a mat. And to keyframe stuff, go over here to under the scopes, there's this little keyframes panel. And what you do is you click this little diamond by corrector 1, whichever corrector you're on, whichever node you're on. I'll hit that. And then I'll just take this gain and let's just push this all the way down. And what this little keyframe diamond does is it sets this to add a keyframe to anything that we touch, basically. So because we touched key output gain, there's a keyframe on key output gain. And then as we push this up, let's say it fades in right about there. We can reset this to 1, and that's going to make this red. And then right about the time that this goes behind the door, we're going to set this key output gain to 1 here. And then the next frame over, we're going to turn it to 0, turn it down like that. So now we have this red eye that comes up when he does his thing. And then we just do that again for this other side too. I'll do a parallel node just because these don't need to be dependent on each other. And yeah, same thing. Grab a circle window, put it over his eye, go over to our tracking and click track forward and backward. That's going to track everything. Then we change the size, make it soft, push this red. And we're going to go to the same place here as our other keyframes. Set this keyframe diamond there. Take the key output gain to 0. Go over here, make it 1. Go over to here, touch it, and then make it 1. That's actually going to happen right about there. I'm going to zoom this in. We're actually going to fade this out a little bit earlier. We'll have it 1 here and then 0 here. And it should work out to where it's, yeah, just a little bit less intense right there. The tracking's moving a little bit, but it's fine for now. We'll just see if this works. Now we have the red eyes. Yeah, cool. The red eyes do move a little bit. It's really hard to see. We'll probably just live with it. They do move a little bit to the side as the door closes, but we're just going to pretend like nobody's going to notice that. If you do want to fix it, you can do kind of the same thing. You can go to your tracker actually and go to the frame you want to change. This one actually looks pretty darn good. Let's go to the other one. This one I feel like is moving a little bit. So this is sort of in the middle here. And we're going to switch this from clip to frame right here. Frame sort of like adds keyframes that are based on your tracking. Then we'll go through and here at this point, we're going to make sure this is still in the middle like that. So that's going to animate in between those two keyframes. And then here, this one is kind of crazy. So we're going to make sure this is good. Go to the next one, make it good. There we go. And then our key output gain is down at this point, so we won't be able to see that. So that's kind of how you fix that stuff really quickly. Then always switch back to clip. You don't want to leave your keyframes on or your tracking in frame mode because it will mess everything up. Now we have his eyes all done. There we go. We have his eyes glowing red, going behind the door. Ooh, we forgot to turn down his fangs here. No problem. Switch book over to Fusion. And there where that kind of comes in. I'll let this blend be 1 here and then 1 frame this way. We're going to turn it all the way down. So now this basically fades in real quick and then it animates everything. So we won't see this before the shot at all. So if we go back to 0 here, we won't have any problems. Yay. Okay, switch back over to color so we can see what the heck is going on. I have a color grade on this, by the way. That's why this looks a little bit different, is I have a group color grade on. So normally in the Fusion and color, these should look exactly the same. If your color management is set right, which looks like it is, but that's okay. I like this little grade that we have here. So now we have our finished effect.
Never judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, there we go.
Never judge a book by its
If you love this and you want to do more visual effects in Fusion, we have a intro to VFX for short films in Fusion right here, available for free. I hope you enjoy. There's no coffee in this. I would have been so smooth to take a sip, but it wasn't in the cards today, was it? Nope.